Can you imagine what it's like to be only 6 years old and completely lost in your mind? Tom was endlessly tormented by dark, unshakable thoughts. One day, he was struck by the terrifying thought that his mother was about to die. Anxiety pierced throughout his entire body. Tom immediately ran around the table next to him. The anxiety fled. His mother was safe. Everyone experiences intrusive thoughts, and then they just let them go and carry on with their day. But someone with OCD believes there is a real danger associated with them, and that they can stop them from becoming reality. Performing compulsions reduces this anxiety and neutralizes the harmful thought. Compulsions can be external acts such as tapping a table a certain number of times, or internal, such as checking memories to make sure something bad didn't happen. The issue with performing compulsions is that they reinforce the idea that the intrusive thoughts did pose a real danger. This increases their frequency and intensity, forming an obsession. The more Tom attempted to save his mother, the more he was tortured by thoughts and images of her dying. He couldn't step on the cracks between steps. When drinking water from a fountain, he had to take a certain number of gulps, even when this made him feel incredibly ill. He also had to write words in just the right way, otherwise they'd have to be scribbled out and rewritten. Tom relentlessly wrestled with his thoughts every day. Tom suffers from a subtype of OCD known as magical thinking. Ancient tribes and civilizations have attempted to control aspects of nature using magic, such as performing a dance to make it rain. The average person can typically find place for a little superstition in their lives without it taking over. Whereas magical thinking sufferers like Tom believe that certain actions will result in feared events, even though the two are completely unrelated. Contamination is a well-known subtype of OCD. Sufferers are consumed with the idea of being contaminated by germs and viruses, which could result in the development of horrible illnesses. They wash their hands excessively in an attempt to cleanse themselves. The problem with this is that they only stop when they feel just right. At this point, their hands may have even started to bleed. Regardless of the subtype of OCD, the pattern is always the same. Frequent, distressing, intrusive thoughts form an obsession. These intrusive thoughts result in a spike of anxiety. Distress is reduced by performing compulsions. This reinforces the idea that the intrusive thoughts were dangerous in the first place, which keeps them coming. The cycle then repeats itself. During Tom's teenage years, his symptoms escalated. He feared that he was going to be locked away in a mental asylum. In a desperate attempt to prevent his mental health from getting even worse, he would avoid coming into contact with mentally ill people, just in case he also developed their symptoms. Information regarding horrific acts, such as murders, would also be avoided. Otherwise, he thought he may be enticed to commit the same acts. Even though it's not in the name, avoidance is an integral part of OCD. We have our original pattern. Intrusive thoughts form an obsession. These cause a spike in anxiety. The sufferer performs a compulsion to get rid of this anxiety. Doing this reinforces the idea that the thoughts were dangerous to begin with, which keeps them coming. This pattern can be broken by avoiding scenarios that trigger severe spikes in anxiety. A contamination sufferer may have intrusive thoughts about a toilet door handle being unclean and open the door with an elbow instead of a hand. This means that they do not get severe spikes in anxiety and therefore have to perform a compulsion. However, like compulsions, avoidance reinforces the idea that there is a real danger associated with the intrusive thoughts. It's like a seesaw. When avoidance is high, the frequency of compulsions is low. And when avoidance is low, the frequency of compulsions is high. At the age of 23, Tom was studying at university and still struggling with OCD. One night, whilst lying in bed, Tom got an intrusive thought: falling asleep is strange. From then on, he always did his best to fall asleep. It was a self-defeating process. He barely slept from then on. Tom was going to university sleep deprived. Worse, he was terrified that he may never sleep again and lose his mind. Tom had no other option. He had to seek professional help. It takes approximately 7 years for OCD sufferers to seek help. This initial process can be very daunting. Many believe they will be judged for what goes on in their minds and be labelled insane. Go to your general practice doctors and ask to be referred to a psychiatrist. If you are diagnosed with OCD, you will typically be offered 2 types of treatment: therapy and medication. Cognitive behavioural therapy is usually the preferred go-to treatment for OCD. It teaches sufferers how to tolerate their thoughts and feelings. Exposure and response prevention is the main type of CBT prescribed to treat OCD. It involves exposing the individual to a feared event or situation and to tolerate the thoughts and feelings that arise, instead of performing a compulsion. Over time, the anxiety naturally subsides. The pattern of OCD is weakened. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors such as Prozac are a type of medication typically prescribed for people with severe OCD. This works by weakening the OCD cycle, allowing the individual to more effectively apply techniques learned in therapy. A few words of warning. SSRI doses for OCD are much higher than they are for depression. You need to be on the maximum dose for at least 13 weeks in order to stabilize at that dosage. While acclimatizing, you may experience nausea, fatigue, stomach issues, irritability, and depression. A future treatment method being explored is psilocybin, one of the psychoactive compounds found in magic mushrooms. Tom visited his local doctor and explained to the best of his ability what had been going on in his mind. The doctor referred him to a psychiatrist who listened to all of Tom's story. Finally, someone understood. He was diagnosed with OCD and prescribed a combination of medication and therapy. Tom gradually started making progress. There were inevitably periods of relapse. However, he knew that these were a normal aspect of the recovery process and that he just had to keep on going. In time, Tom learned to live alongside his OCD. He was able to tolerate his thoughts and feelings, and regardless of his mental state, act according to his beliefs and values. Tom had always felt lost and broken. Now, he was becoming the person he was always destined to be. There are a number of misconceptions regarding OCD. A preference for symmetry is not OCD. Being a bit of a perfectionist is not OCD. If you haven't been diagnosed with this illness, do not go around saying that you're so OCD. Doing so trivializes a severe mental disorder that millions suffer with. If you are concerned about your mental health, book an appointment with an appropriate medical professional. The sooner a mental illness is diagnosed, the sooner you can start reducing its negative impacts on your life. If you appreciate the work we're doing, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support will allow us to consistently produce videos on the symptoms and treatment methods of mental illnesses. You can join us on this journey of spreading information on mental health issues by subscribing and tapping that notification bell. Let's normalize mental health issues together.